Supergirl Season 3, Episode 5, Damage. Now this was definitely a cool episode. We actually get to, in a sense, excuse me, focus on Lena as she's kind of being blamed for basically her helping out the city has led to, seemingly, the disastrous consequence of a bunch of kids getting lead poisoning. So it was a pretty interesting episode where it kind of kicks off like that. They started off pretty early on. We have I can't even remember his name. I already forgot his name. But our new sort of pseudo main villain. We'll see how often he really shows up. I thought he'd be more common by this point, but we've only seen him twice so far, so I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, okay. I thought for sure he would be basically the second half of the villains, and he was in. I can't even remember if he was actually in the premiere, but he was either in the premiere or episode 2, and then, finally this one again. So it's just interesting, okay, he's not as big of a deal as I thought he was going to be, but he comes in and it's like, oh, well, we'll go ahead and basically poison this pool, poison these kids, and kind of blame it on Lena Luthor, because it's, a lead device that's kind of dispersed into the sky, and it's, falling upon people, and it's like, oh, that's poisoning all these kids, which... one of the big things I would definitely have to say is, okay, well, if you're a kid, odds are you're with your parent. So, if a kid is getting lead poisoning, it should be more than just kids. If something happens, it would be more than just kids being affected, even though, of course, kids are more susceptible than adults. If this many kids got affected, there would at least be an adult. There would be no way where it's only children are being affected. It would have to be such a weird thing for only the kids to have this sort of reaction to that, as if it has zero effect whatsoever. Lead poisoning is lead poisoning. That's not something, that's not like chicken pox, where it's oh, if you had it, you aren't affected, or anything like that, like poison ivy. Well, I guess poison ivy isn't a good example either, but if people are affected by lead poisoning, it's everyone. It should have, even with what they showed where it ultimately came down to the pool, it was still super weird that it was only kids were swimming in the pool at that exact moment in time. It was a giant swimming pool. There should have been tons of people that were poisoned, not just, children. But, it goes along and it's all right, well, we don't really know what the deal is, because technically it was lead being dispersed into the sky to, get rid of the Daxamites and save the entire city and possibly the world. And it worked. And then it's oh, suddenly kids are passing out at school and there's just disasters left and right. We don't really know what's going on. And of course the blame is dropped on Lena. And so she has to step down from her positions both at Catco and at L-Corp. And so she decides to throw this press conference hey, I understand why people are upset. I would be upset too if I thought someone would poison my kids. So I'm kind of, she's trying to kind of explain herself a little, saying I'm going to step down and we're going to figure out exactly what this cause is. Because she didn't really know. And at this point she was just taking all the hits, because it was I can't say it's not me, but... at this point, that's all we have to go on, is that it's probably me, because, lead dispersal. Otherwise, it's not her, but there are no other clues. So, of course, everything is focused on her, so she's kind of taking the heat and taking that emotional toil from parents being, very upset that their children are getting sick, possibly even dying. And, of course, that leads to her being shot at during the press conference, and Jimmy ultimately ends up being shot in the arm. They have a pretty cool sequence where a car actually catches a bullet midair. I thought that was actually really cool. And then, of course, that leads to a segment at the end of the episode where, God, I swear I cannot, all I can think of is Rain. I cannot remember this woman's name for the life of me. But she finds out that, her daughter Ruby points out that she had a hole in her shirt, and so she looks at it and she finds a bullet in her jacket, because she realized she was actually shot when that woman was shooting at the press conference. So that was a cool little moment at the end. I hope they start building that up a little bit faster. If I'm being totally honest, I'm just being impatient, because we're only in episode 5. I don't know how many episodes we'll have, but typically the CW shows have fairly long seasons, and it's just crap, I'm losing my mind waiting for her to somehow turn evil. I'm just so excited to see what can make this character who's grown up and had a child just suddenly turn evil. What is going to activate within this character that's going to make her the main villain of the season. So just every little step they build towards it actually has me super excited. Especially with her not being a villain at this point and having a daughter. There's so many things that make her just a good character, and then knowing that she's going to become the main villain, all I keep thinking is, what is going to happen? What is going to be that next step for her that, just stops her or from being the good person that she is right now. And also now I have to wonder, has she just never realized that she doesn't get bruised or anything, or is it only during intense situations? Because of course, when she was saving her daughter, it like kicked up her super strength. And then naturally, when she's in a crazy situation where a random woman just starts shooting on stage, of course, like that heightened adrenaline, that just, it totally makes sense that would kick in her power. So it's like if she doesn't have that heightened sense of adrenaline, if she's not in a fight or flight situation, she's just a normal person. But once it kicks into that moment, it's like, she'll be able to pretty much survive anything. Like during, I think it was episode 2, when the wrecking ball was about to fall on her and Ruby, she probably would have been able to just like guard her daughter because she was in like a crazy, intense situation. Her body probably kicked its powers up like, okay, time to defend, and she probably would have totally survived that. But it's just very interesting. I would love to, get some more answers on that because we don't really know exactly how her powers work, but it does seem to be adrenaline based. But of course, she was kind of built that way from Krypton. So a lot of questions there still, but I thought it was a great way to end that out with her character. Like just another little moment for her. Like they, every couple of episodes, it's like she had the crazy dream sequence, or I guess not necessarily a dream because she was awake, but she had the crazy moment in the mirror where she was seeing like all the tattoos and stuff and the woman coming up behind her. This episode, she has the bullet, drop out of the jacket, which is 100% definitive. That's not something you can just be like, oh, that was a dream or anything like that. She was hit by a bullet and it hit her stomach. Nothing happened. Went through her shirt, went through her jacket, and she was just totally fine. So can't wait to see how she starts to go a little bit further with that. But in this episode, it was pretty cool. Everybody's trying to help out Lena, like, hey, things just suck. And Lena was getting super drunk because she was just in like this crazy situation where it's like, I probably just killed a bunch of kids. So of course, I'm just gonna have to go with Rain. But of course, Rain and Kara team up and they end up following the money. And that's how they end up finding out like where these kids were when they were together. And then that ultimately leads them to the swimming pool where they find out, I think it was called like Acre Lee or something like that, where it's like, this is what's happening. Like this company was putting something in the water, and when it mixes, with water, it basically produces the same issues as lead poisoning. And I love that scene when Kara actually called Lena to tell like, oh, it's this company. And she repeats the name. It's like, yeah, do you know it? She was like, nope. Thanks. And when she hung up the phone, the face she made was like, yep, it's time to like chop his balls off or something. Like the face she made was just like, like she was going to murder him, which was pretty much her plan. And that was pretty intense. And I love that scene where she goes to the guy and she confronts him and everything, and then she pulls a gun on him. She was doing, the typical TV thing, like whether you're a hero or a villain, when it comes down to killing somebody, somebody's got a monologue and then nobody dies. So of course she was talking it up and stuff, and then the bodyguard like hits her in the back of the head. She wakes up on a plane full of poisonous chemicals, or well, they're poisonous once they interact with water. And not only was he trying to kill her, but his plan was to poison the entire city. Like he's just like, whatever. I'm just gonna crash this plane, and the barrels will dissolve in the water. Then the chemical will spread throughout the lake and poison everybody. It was just like, there's really no reason. He just went like full villain. Like him doing this stuff, I mean, it was still all villain based because it's like, wow, you're willing to poison kids just to kind of tear her down because she bought a company from up under you. But then it goes beyond that to, I'm going to kill her and poison everyone, and then still kind of push that on, oh, this person, who's now dead that I killed is the reason that we're all dying. Everybody's dying now because, it's finally gotten to the point where it's poisoning, affecting the water. So it's just really nuts. It was like, wow, I cannot believe that this, this is actually happening. Which, another thing with lead poisoning, does it really take that long? Because I thought lead poisoning was, I guess it takes a minute, but I thought lead poisoning the symptoms would have shown up a bit sooner because it's been months since they did that. I don't know how long it's been exactly, but I thought it had been quite some time since the end of the last season, because that was like the whole point in the beginning, is that she'd been kind of torn away from everybody for like weeks at a time. So it may have only been a few weeks, so it probably makes sense. Makes more sense. But I was like, man, this is just nuts. Like this whole plan is just crazy. Poison the kids, poison the entire town, kill Lena in the process, and it was just a crazy little sequence. But of course, because they're stupid, Lena's able to get even like the smallest little distress signal out, and then afterwards when she's about to try that, that's when he's like jammed the signal. I'm like, why wouldn't they have done that in the very beginning? Like, let's make sure she cannot possibly communicate, take her phone, take anything electronic she might have on her that could send off a ping or any sort of signal, And let's make sure, we'll block communications. We'll just take out communications. They were on a remote control plane. I mean, the only reason you would need that is because no one's going to be on it. So, why not just take that whole system out of there, especially if your plan was to fly it. But naturally, he attempted. He was going to, I assume, use the plane later. He didn't plan on crashing it until, Kara kind of showed up, or even like just before. It was like, all right, well, I guess it's time to crash the plane. Let's just deal with this and like kind of get it over with. Kara comes in. Of course, she's able to stop the ship from crashing into the water. But because it blew the engines, and she had to like basically from within force it to like stay straight instead of actually like nosediving. She's like keeping it up with her hands. It splits, which I actually thought was a really cool segment of the episode, where it's like, okay, she's at this point, it's pretty simple. She's just holding the plane steady and like keeping it from dipping. And so the engines blow out, which is her plan, and that way she wouldn't have to fight it anymore. And it's like right as it's about to get to the end where the rest of the engines need to blow out, she can't the pressure is like too much. It's too much opposite. So it snaps in half. The nose of the plane comes off, and then basically it's just the rest of the plane. So she was having issues like holding on to it, and Lena's like, let go of me and basically, hold on to the barrels. And the first thing I thought, it was before Kara actually said it, but the first thing I thought was, all she has to do is climb. Like, she doesn't have, they're still super high up in the air. She doesn't have to die. Like, she can just get up and just climb straight up to her. And of course, that's what, Kara says is like, climb. And so she does, and then everything works out fine. Like, she drops that segment off, she holds on to the larger portion. They're able to keep the barrels from poisoning the entire city. Lena is saved, everything's good to go. And then Kara actually confronts the guy at the end of the episode, and he was super dark. And like I said, I mean, the whole thing was he's willing to poison kids and then the entire town just to kind of destroy Lena's image, even though he was literally trying to destroy her with the whole town poisoning thing with the with the plane. But it was just nuts. I was like, wow, he's kind of talking to her, and it's like, if you want to stop me, you should probably kill me. Like, that's how bad, like, he's saying, like, I'm such a bad villain, like, I'm such a bad person to pretty much humanity at this point. What you need to do is kill me. But you guys in capes don't really do that sort of thing, so that's just not going to happen. You don't have it in you, so I'm just going to do what I do. It's going to be horrible, and you're going to have to stop me, but you'll never completely stop me because you won't kill me. And it was just nuts. It was almost like the calm version of what everyone's always saying to Batman about the Joker, where it's like the Joker's always killing like hundreds of people, and then you just put him up in Arkham Asylum, and it was almost like that, but just on a much calmer scale, where it's just like this insanely evil businessman. And he even says it himself, like, sure, you dumped me on a boat when you were pissed last time. That sucked. Took me a bit of time to get back home. A couple of bucks for dry cleaning, no big deal. But I'm going to keep going. Like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And, you were mad the first time, and then because you didn't kill me, it led to this. And because you haven't killed me now, it's going to lead to something else. And I was like, this is actually a really cool villain. So I don't really know what is going to happen with him. And it did make me wonder if he would at some point end up teaming up and, like, utilizing Rain. Because that's, like, his whole thing is that, well, you guys aren't going to kill me. But he's like, but if the roles were reversed or something like that, like, I would take you down. Like, I would crush my enemies. And he was talking about if he had that power, and all I kept thinking was, he doesn't have it now, but if another super-powered villain happened to come along, like Rain, or even the people inside the ship, we didn't really get anything extra from them this episode, but even if they came along, other Kryptonians that have the strength of Kara, if not more, they're not, better well-trained or whatever, he would try to utilize that to say, hey, if we can find some way to work together, get rid of her, then we can kind of rule the world. Naturally, with it being like anyone who's Kryptonian always ends up coming out as evil, like, except for like two characters, and that's always Supergirl and Superman. So they'll probably end up betraying him or something like that, and he'll it won't work. But with Rain, that's not necessarily the case. She doesn't she grew up as human, not knowing in any regard that she was actually even superhuman. Like, she didn't even realize that part, not just Kryptonian, but superhuman in general. So there's a lot to that, and she might just assume she's metahuman rather than actually being Kryptonian, because that's a legitimate thing. So it's like she might just assume somehow along the line throughout my life I developed powers, but she's always had them and just never fully realized it. So I don't know if that's what is going to happen, but it's a simple way to combine the two main villains for the season and have this guy is like the evil businessman say, I don't have the power, but I wish I had the power to just crush you and get rid of all my enemies. And then of course you have the brute strength who does have the physical power, and depending on how they decide to do it, maybe not the exact mental capacity to fight against those darker urges, depending on how they go about it with her actually turning evil. He can utilize that to his advantage to take out Supergirl, or at least attempt to take out Supergirl and Jean. But very excited to see where that goes. I think that like it might not necessarily come to that, but that's all I kept thinking when he was talking about wishing he had the strength to do it, and knowing that we have a superpowered villain kind of going towards becoming, like an actual threat. And it's just like, it just totally makes sense. Eventually this threat is going to come up. He's going to see that and be like, I can use that to take out Supergirl. And then all he has to do is his normal business stuff to try to take out Lena. So that's where I feel like it's headed. But I thought the main story was definitely good. Side story, not so good. Of course, this is the episode where Alex and Maggie do officially decide to break up, and it sucked. I mentioned that, like as soon as they brought up the baby thing, I was just like, yep, that's gonna be the end of that relationship. It was obvious that it was happening. You could see it coming a mile away from that moment. And it was like, it still sucked in this episode. They're talking about it, and it was even like in the beginning of the episode when they first take out like the busload of people, and Kara's like, how are you doing? And Alex was like, not great, because that was like meant to be that final moment when Maggie was supposed to, pack herself up and leave the apartment, and they would officially end it. So, they talk about it and how painful it is for them. Then they have a moment where they do get together, and it's like, that's great, but it's still, it's like having that great thing in that moment, but there's just a grander thing that you can't let go of. And that's kind of exactly what they do, where Alex says, like, there's just things that I always saw growing up, and there's things I've always wanted, and not having that will always haunt me if I can, and you don't want that. So, unfortunately, they do officially break up, and it was just crappy, and I hated it. But it does lead to what seems like it's going to be a really great episode next week. I hope it is. I mean, it's like all flashbacks and stuff, or a lot of it at least is going to be like flashbacks to Kara and Alex growing up, and I'm actually really excited for that. It seemed like it would legitimately be a good episode. Erica Durance is going to be showing up as Kara's mom, which has me very curious because I don't know what that means. It could be another dream sequence with Kara when she was just younger and she thought she saw her mom, and it was just another crazy dream sequence sort of moment. But it was interesting because I was just like, I don't know if she's actually there, which also wouldn't make any sense because she's really dead. So I have to assume it's some sort of dream sequence situation. Maybe it's even a shape-shifting situation. That wouldn't be that crazy either. But definitely have to wonder why she's there, and I'm curious what the modern day story is going to kind of revolve around, because of course with them leaving to go back home, that does leave the city somewhat unprotected. You have Martian Manhunter. We might actually get to see like 2 Martian Manhunters. That would actually be really cool if that was how they kind of handle issues within the city for the next couple episodes. I would love that. But we'll see how that ultimately plays out. But I'm sure there'll be some element where it's like, oh man, there's a villain in the city, but we don't have Supergirl to save us. Somebody else has to step in. Maybe Sean will step in as Supergirl. That would be kind of funny, just to like keep up appearances. Because that sort of thing always happens in TV shows where it's like, or superhero shows. It's like, oh, the hero didn't show up. They must be out of town, and then everything like goes super freaking crazy. Like that always happens in superhero shows. It's like, huh, they didn't stop that petty robbery. They must not be in town, or they're injured or something. They can't help right now. And if somebody can't step in, absolute chaos. That's just how it is all the freaking time. So I am looking forward to how the next episode is going to play out, mostly from the flashbacks of Alex and Kara and just them building up as sisters. I'm actually super excited for that. I think with the way this season has gone, with all the emotional stuff and how well it's been played and how great they did it. They even referenced Flint, Michigan, which I was very surprised by. I was like, huh, that's not that far from where I live. I was in a couple hours. But it was like, man, that's something like in my general area at least, and that's a huge deal. Of course, that was national news. But it was like, man, Supergirl mentioned, like Flint, Michigan, which is still a thing for anyone who doesn't know. That's still an issue, which is insane. But always seen it on Facebook, like it's been forever since that's been brought up, and that's still a thing that they're dealing with in the city. It's just like, that's pathetic. But anyway, I just wanted to, I was like, wow, I didn't think that that would be something that they brought up. But it's just interesting, they've been doing like the emotional stuff fairly well, and even though this sucked, because we kind of saw it coming episodes ago, what it leads to, I think, is going to be really well done. So I'm hoping for sure that these flashbacks are great, and yeah, we get to see some like early moments. Like they almost seem like they had a reference to the old Superman movies with Kara like running through the forest. How she was kind of running and jumping at the same time. I was like, I feel like that's supposed to be a reference to like the old school Superman movie. So I thought that was cool, and it seems like it's going to be interesting. Kara learning her powers and learning to be a little sister. Alex learning to be a big sister to, an alien and stuff like that. We get to have a whole episode devoted to them throughout their lives, because it wasn't normally it's just them as kids, and this is them as like kids, and then it seemed like also teenagers, and that's what has me the most excited, because we've seen them as kids a bunch of times. It's never like, oh, this is us in high school. It's always them as like 10-year-olds, like that sort of thing. So them as like teenagers doing this, and just going up to modern day, that actually has me excited, because it's stuff that we haven't even seen the characters like that at all yet. So certainly looking forward to it. I really enjoyed this episode, but of course we'd love to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it, and I actually would love to know what you guys want to see the most from Kara and Alex's flashbacks in the next episode. What story elements you guys are interested in seeing. Maybe, some of you guys might want to see Dean Cain come back. Considering it's a flashback episode, I assume that they have to have gotten him in there, at least in one of the flashbacks. He's got to show up, right? So, we'd love to see him make a return in the next episode, but I would also just love to see them kind of talk a little bit more about, like, Kara during the early days. Or, well, I guess it would be your teenage years, because she was already, every day was like the early day when it goes to the flashbacks, but the teenage years of her kind of, going through teenage adolescence and stuff, and then thinking of, this is what it would have been like on Krypton, and maybe we get some more, views of Krypton, like even, flashbacks within flashbacks, that sort of thing. So I would kind of love to see that some more of, more Kryptonian culture show up as Kara is going through the later stages of her life. Like, man, this is what it was like on Krypton, even though I never lived this version of being a teenager on Krypton. This is what it would have been like, and this is what it is now. Like, this age was far more important here than it is on Earth, or something like that. So I would love to see more Kryptonian culture kind of show up in the flashbacks as she kind of goes through those elements. And like I said, I would like to see Dean Cain just show up, just because, he's Dean Cain and the dad. It just makes sense to have both parents in the flashbacks. And of course, I can't wait for the answer as to why Kara is seeing her mother. So that's what I want to see, but we'd love to know what you guys want to see. And if you guys have any theories on that as well, we'd love to know them. And like I said, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general, so please comment below, let me know. And thanks for watching.